Hey everybody, welcome back. This is part 2 of my 3-part series showing how I set up open broadcasting software in Reaper for my live set performances. So just a quick recap of part 1, I have that linked up above and in the description below, but just quickly here, I just did a walkthrough of a Reaper project from one of my most recent live performances, showed you some tips and tricks, how my tracks are set up and structured, and most importantly, how all the automation works. So let's get into this, and Reaper and OBS, in my opinion, are the gruesome twosome. Now again, here is the diagram that I showed in the first video, so we're really going to be spending pretty much all our time over here in this video. And then in part 3, we'll be talking about the DMX lights, how to set them up, how to program them, how to integrate them into this entire setup, and basically how to bring this entire environment together. Now, before we get into the setup for this video, you're going to need some additional software. The first thing you're going to need are Reaper standalone plugins. Now, again, if you're using your own DAW, you don't have to use Reaper. You're still going to need these anyway because of one particular plugin that you're going to need that's going to get the audio streamed out of Reaper and then received inside OBS. So this is a very straightforward install. Here's the actual site. Of course, I'll link this and every other piece of software and every other documentation you might need. But just download this software and move on. The standalone plugins get installed usually within one of these 5 folders if you're on Windows. But this is just really here for reference. You shouldn't have to worry about OBS not having visibility into where your VST plugins are. It should just know. But I will link this anyway, just in case something happens or you, for some reason, have installed your plugins into some other folder that OBS just can't see. Next, you're going to need a plugin for OBS called OBS MIDI. I prefer this one because it's native to OBS. You can interact with it within OBS itself. So it's one less piece of software. And again, less is more. We're trying to keep things simple. The individuals who maintain this plugin, they call it an alpha, but to me, it works just fine. So I think you can still use it just as much as I do, and your mileage should be just as good. And then you can download this off of GitHub, and this is linked right off of the OBS MIDI page. Next, you're going to need a virtual MIDI driver. So this is how you're going to send MIDI events from Reaper, and then you basically use OBS MIDI to interpret and receive that data, and then get OBS to do things like switch scenes or apply filters, and whatever creative things that you want. So this is a very straightforward install. It's free, of course. It's no frills. The user interface is super minimal. There are other virtual MIDI drivers out there. I just happen to use this one because it's super simple and it works. All right, let's get into this. So the first thing we're going to do is figure out how to get the audio from Reaper into OBS. And this is something that I struggled with for a long time, and it was just kind of mentioned offhand in an instructional video I watched once for mixing. And it works, and it's low latency. So even hardware solutions, like trying to run cables around, like from like my audio interface to like my sound card, just had noise on them. I never could get it to work right. Anyway, let's go through what happens on the Reaper side. And I realize, like, because I'm using OBS to record this video, and I'm also trying to show you what I'm doing with it, you're going to see this OBSception video kind of thing, and it's going to be kind of awkward, but just bear with that. I talked about last time how my particular project is set up, and again, if you can go back to the video or just take a look at the template project that I have linked in the description. But the magic happens here with Restream. So Restream, and I'm going to open this here, is a super simple plugin. All it does is it streams the audio to another machine. So just stream the audio to your own PC is basically what I'm telling this to do. But you need a Restream plugin somewhere else to actually receive that audio. So right now, I'm just going to play this very quick clip, but you're not going to be able to hear it. You can see that the audio in Reaper is clearly going based on what's happening on the left side, but you, the viewer, cannot hear what's happening because we need a way to capture the audio from Reaper. So this is how you do it. First, just put the Restream plugin on whatever audio you want to send. Again, what I did in my project is I'm sending the audio from this bus, which contains my backing tracks that I'm playing to, and then all of my instruments. and maybe some other things that probably aren't super important, but audio-wise, that's what we're getting. And then I obfuscate certain things like click tracks and cues, which I don't want the audience to hear, so I don't want that streamed. So we're only streaming what we want the audience to hear. So what I'll do quickly here is I'll take Restream off just so I can show you how to set it up. So we'll click here on the effects, and here's all our effects. We just type in at least enough letters to pick up on Restream. There we go. And then we need to set this to send audio MIDI IP, and then we set this to local broadcast, and then audio channels will be 2. And you are done there. Now over on OBS, you will need to set up an audio input capture. So here I have my display capture, which again, you can't hear Reaper, so let's fix that. We're gonna add an audio input capture. Call it Reaper. Say OK. Now it's going to ask you what device to use, and in my case, these are all the devices that I have plugged in to my PC. Essentially, you'll probably just pick whatever your audio interface is. But if I do that for this demo, you're going to hear my microphone twice, and you don't want that, or I don't want you to have to deal with that annoyance. So all I'm really going to do is just send this audio virtual cable, which is just a dummy thing. In your case, you would probably set this to your audio interface. So this is just going to get sent there. Now, there's never going to be any audio getting sent out from Reaper anyway. We just want it to receive. Here's where the magic really happens. On Reaper, we'll right-click, apply a filter, plus, and then we add a VST plugin. And then we'll call this Restream, because that's what we're going to turn on. There we go. Now we pick the plugin. So if you've installed your standalone Reaper plugins, it should show up here. Now, obviously, I have a bunch of other stuff here, which you can ignore. My Restream for me is near the bottom of this list. This is some kind of weird alphabetical thing, whatever. But Restream is here at the bottom in my case, and then we go to Open Plugin Interface, and you don't have to do anything. Just it's set to receive audio MIDI by default. So you're done. Now, when I play this again, you should be able to hear the audio from Reaper. Perfect. Okay, so there's that trick. Now, the one thing I'm gonna have to mention though is whenever you set up scenes in OBS, you need to make sure that you create that source in every single one of your scenes where you want your audience to hear Reaper. Because if you miss that, you could switch from one scene where Reaper is sending audio and then a scene that doesn't, where you've just forgot to add it, and your audio is going to go silent, and it's going to be very awkward. So in situations like that, of course, just make sure you're adding Reaper to every single one of your scenes, which I'll be doing. But of course, you always want to test out your live performance setup before you actually perform live, right? All right, so let's set up a scene or two. So I'm going to set up a scene for my main camera. And I realize everything went black, so just bear with me and we will come back. I'm adding a video capture device. This is my main camera, and we'll call that main cam. And I'm just basically adding my front webcam to my scene, and I'm almost done here. There we go. Okay, so hi. So this is my main camera, which I use. Whatever your main camera is, who knows? But in my case, it captures me talking to the audience. Here's my vocal microphone. And in cases where I'm actually doing vocals, which is not often, I use this main camera. So what I'm going to do is, just so you can see what the heck I'm doing, let's resize that, and let's put our display capture back so you can actually see my monitor. So add existing, add monitor, and we'll move our camera up there. So we'll do this kind of picture-in-picture thing. Of course, like if you're doing your actual live performance, you would have your camera taking up the whole screen. But let me move myself out of the way here. And like I said before, make sure you add Reaper to every single scene that you want your audience here, where you want your audience to actually hear the audio from Reaper. So, but that's easy. I'll do audio input capture, add existing. Reaper's already here because I created it before. So just hit OK, and there we go. And just to be double sure that we're good, I'm going to play the track from Reaper again. And you can hear that just fine. Okay, so that's how we set up that camera scene. So what I'm going to do is let's set up another scene, and I'm going to do a plus here. I'm going to add this scene. So let's do a video capture. Let's call it Reaper video capture. So again, what we're trying to do here is demonstrate, let's say you want to play a video for your audience in an automated way. And this should be useful in situations where it's like, let's say there's like some long interlude where you're actually not playing any instruments. And you could just kind of be standing there awkwardly and not doing anything. Or you can show your audience something to just kind of keep them interested. And you've seen some other demos of mine where like I do like this split screen thing where like I'm playing on the left side and then I have some Mega Man gameplay on the right side. It's just more interesting and it kind of keeps the audience engaged. And it's also you're somewhat trying to mimic like if you're the live experience, if they're actually at a live show and there might be a big projector playing a video in the back. So that's what we're going to try to emulate here. And yes, I have disappeared again. So let me put my display capture back. And so there we go. So now you should be able to see everything again, and I'll demonstrate what we're actually trying to do. Okay, now what I'm about to show you here is the way that I've done this. There may be other better ways to do what I'm about to show you. So if that's the case, just let me know in the comments. Hit me up somewhere on Discord or Twitter, whatever makes sense to you. But this is what worked for me, and there are pros and cons between this approach and another, which I'll explain. So obviously within OBS, you can set up scenes for videos. Like if I wanted to have a video for one specific song, I could just set up that scene and then drop in a video input, and then it'll just play that video whenever you switch to that scene. And you would switch to that scene by sending MIDI events, which we're going to get to. But anyway, the way I do it is I dock the video window within Reaper itself, and then I capture that window within OBS. Now, the reason why I like to do that is because I only need one scene to actually execute this. And then I put the videos inside the timeline or inside the project of Reaper itself. So I personally like to do it that way. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Now, over here in Reaper on the left, we have our mixer down here. Now, what we want is the actual video. And let's go find a section where video is actually playing. And so there's my video clips for OBS. Here we go. So now if I want to look at the video, so I go to view and I just click video or control shift V or command shift V, depending on Mac or PC. So here's our actual video. This is what I would want to capture from OBS. So then now obviously when you're actually doing your live performance, you want to make sure this video window is up. So I'll just quickly play this, and oh well, I almost forgot that I have to add Reaper as my audio input, or else you're not going to be able to hear anything, and nor is your audience. So there we go. Now I'm just going to play this section really quick. So again, in this song Bloodstar Beast, there's this interlude where I don't play for like a good 15-20 seconds, so I just want to show the audience something. So let's capture that. And if you're familiar with OBS, you probably know what I'm about to do. All I'm really going to do is just capture this part of the screen using a crop pad filter. So we're going to add a window capture, and we'll do Reaper window. We'll just say Reaper video window to be a little more specific. And there we go. So now we're capturing all of Reaper, but obviously we don't want that. At this point, I can just hit OK just so you can see it. And now I realize like this probably looks a bit awkward. This is kind of weird with obviously just trying to capture all this stuff with OBS and showing it to you, but whatever. Now let's actually capture the part of the window that we want. So we're going to right click here, and we'll click on filters. And here you can see there's the window that we're going to be manipulating. So I'll hit plus here, and we'll do a crop pad filter. Good to go. And this is where it just takes a little bit of manual work, but hopefully not too much. All I'm really doing is just using my mouse wheel to crop out what I don't want. And it's probably going to be inexact, but that is okay for purposes of this demo. You can do any fine-tuned tweaking on your side as you need to. And there we go. So we have now captured that as a source. Now I'm going to also, here, I'm going to make this full screen just to try to emulate what your audience would see. So right click, transform, fit to screen, or just Control F. Shortcut keys to your friend, so I'm going to use that. Control F. There you go. So this is what your audience would, and you can see the cropping is a little bit off there. You can manipulate things to fix little imperfections like that. But essentially, if I switch to this scene, and let's do this. So I'll put myself back up here in full screen just to kind of demonstrate this. So let's say, I'm talking to the audience as an example, and then I want to switch to the scene where I want to play this video. So there you go. And that's what the audience would actually see. So let's play some audio. And then of course I'm doing this by hand, but the whole point is that you're going to automate this with MIDI, and we're about to go there next. But let's just play this. Okay, so that is obviously grossly oversimplified, but that's how that works. Okay, now let's get to some real magic. Let's talk about how to send MIDI events from Reaper to OBS, and then get OBS to interpret those signals to actually automate things like scene changes. So within my Reaper project here on the left, we have this track, which I've mentioned a few times, called OBS Scene Control. So this is just very quickly, and I'll expand this out a little bit. All this is just, it's just MIDI. That's it. We're just sending MIDI events. There's no audio on it. Now, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you're sending these MIDI events to that virtual MIDI cable. So right here on this track, and maybe it's a little bit gray, so it's kind of hard to see, but here I have, I'll remove this just so you can see how to set this up for the first time. But on your sends hardware inputs, just click this. You will send your MIDI hardware output to loop BE internal MIDI. So that will actually send the MIDI signals to that virtual MIDI cable. One thing I want to mention is if you don't happen to see it in that list, you just want to double check that that loop B internal MIDI is actually enabled as an output. Here I have it disabled as an input because I don't need it as an input. I want to send signals out. So it's a possibility that when you install this for the first time, it should show up in your list of MIDI devices in Reaper. So here I'm just in the preferences menu under MIDI devices, and you should see it. But if it's not enabled, it may not be. Just make sure you actually enable that as an output. So that's how you would fix the issue of, like, if you go here to add it to the actual hardware output of this track and it's not there, just make sure it's actually enabled. So that should be it for that piece. Now we're sending the MIDI signals out to the virtual MIDI cable. Now we need OBS to listen for events on that MIDI cable. And I keep using cable, but that's we're putting that in air quotes, to actually receive those signals and then do things. So this is where OBS MIDI comes in, the plugin that you installed that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. So here within OBS, go to Tools, OBS MIDI Settings. This menu item should show up if you've installed OBS MIDI. And then this window is going to show up here. You're going to see two devices. One is going to be your virtual MIDI cable, the loop B internal. The other is, at least in my case, is the MIDI output of my audio interface. We're going to ignore that for now. We're going to come back to that actually in part 3, because that's what we're going to rely on to send MIDI to our DMX controller to control lights. So anyway, make sure this is clicked, make sure this is enabled. It should already be there. And then go to this tab to actually configure the events. And you can see in this case, I have no events. We're setting this up from scratch. So now we need to tell OBS what event to listen for. I don't think there's a way to do this manually with OBS MIDI. Like, I can't just say, like, I want to, like I can't, it's like on a node on event for node 80. I can't type into this box. It won't let me. So that's a limitation of the plugin, but not to worry. There is a way to work around this. We just basically need to send an event and make sure we're listening for it. And then once it picks up on the event, then we can follow through with the rest of, like, what do we want to do with that event. I'm going to create a, within my scene control track here, I'm just going to create a new MIDI item. It's empty. And I'm going to double click this, and this is an obscenely large MIDI window, which we don't want because you won't be able to see what I'm doing. So let's kind of move stuff around here. And we need to send an actual, we just need to generate an event. So I will click listen 1, and then whatever first event comes in on that MIDI, that virtual MIDI cable, is going to get picked up. So let's use note 80 here. So it's just a click and drag, and there we go. You can see that the event was picked up on. So it was note 80 with a value of 96. 96 corresponds to the velocity of this particular note. You don't have to you don't have to mess with this if you don't want to. Like sometimes I'll set my MIDI events for scene control to just the max number of 127, just to keep it consistent. So what I'll do is I'll take this MIDI note and just drag up to make it 127, and then I'll click listen one again, and then just click on this note, which is already defined. I just have to click on it to send it, and there we go. So there, now we're at 80 and 127. Again, completely optional. I just do this for consistency. So now we have our event captured. What do you want to do with it? So let's do a transition, and notice you have a bunch of different things you can do here. So apply filters, take filters away, move from one scene to the other, fade in, fade out. Most of the time I'm doing transitions. So again, you know, like I talked about in part one, there's a lot of creative things you can do. So let's move from whatever scene I'm on to the main camera. Whoops, that was a mistake there. There we go. So I want to switch from whatever I see on the screen to the current scene, to the main camera screen. And let's say I want to just make this a fade of 1,000 milliseconds, or 1 second. Whoops, and let's do that. Okay, and then we click add mapping, and there is our event. So what's going to happen here is there's that event that I just created, and I'll play this section of the song, and I'll bring up my main camera. So there's my main camera. Actually, no, that's the source we want to switch to. So what's going to happen here is I will play the song from this part right here, and when it hits this event, it should switch to the main camera scene without any intervention from me. It'll be automatic. So let's try it. And there you go. And as you can see, it was a 1 second fade. So you have control over that too, which is pretty neat. Now that's how you set up an event within OBS MIDI, and you would just do that over and over and over for every single thing that you want. All right, I hope you learned something from my bag of tricks here. You could take everything that you've learned so far and just kind of hit the ground running with how to automate your scene switches and do multiple cameras, whatever your creative possibilities take you. In the next video, we'll be taking you to the the deep rabbit hole of DMX lights, but it's pretty cool, and I'll be showing you how to integrate all of that stuff into this setup as a whole. So I will see you next time for part 3.